Welcome to this executive meeting this morning. First of all, we need to approve as a correct record the minutes of the meeting held on the 26th of May. Those have been sent to you, but I don't have a copy in front of me. Do we have a copy? Have you got a spare copy of the?
Not paper.
Oh,
Chair.
don't worry.
Only online, sorry.
Okay, don't worry. Executive members, are you happy to approve these minutes? Yes? Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, that's the minutes approved. I don't have any urgent business to bring forward this morning. I'm not anticipating we're going to need to divide the agenda. Members, you're invited to declare any personal or disclosable pecuniary interests, including the nature and extent of such interests they may have in any items to be considered at this meeting. Do you have any interest to declare? Executive members first.
No.
No? Any other members present? Can't see anything, but mind you, I can't see much in them. But, right, the executive forward plan. This is.
Sorry, Chair, we've got public questions.
Oh, I'm sorry, public question time, I beg your pardon. How can I go over that? Now, have copies of these questions and answers been circulated to everybody?
To exec members.
To the executive members only. So we're going to have the questions and the answers?
I think for the purpose of streaming as well, Chair.
Fine, okay, yes, of course. So, so we have a quarter of an hour for these questions. It's 11:05 now. Mrs. Snow, would you like to ask your question, please? Are you here, Mrs. Snow?
We haven't a notification that any questioners are attending, Chair.
So, how do you want me to handle the questions then? Do you want me to read out the questions and the answers?
I think for the purpose of streaming, yes, please.
Thank you. Right, so the question from Mrs. Snow reads, the Air Quality Annual Status Report 2019 page 12 states, South Hams District Council anticipates that further additional measures not yet prescribed will be required in subsequent years to achieve compliance and enable the revocation of Totnes and Dean Prior ACMAs. What additional measures has the Council now introduced? Sorry, ACMAs are air quality management appraisals, I think. So our response to Mrs. Snow is, the JLP contains policies relating specifically to all of the ACMAs in the South Hams. These policies mean that we can ask for air quality mitigation measures from new developments. For recent planning applications for Groom Park and Sawmills at Dartington, developers have agreed to help improve walking and cycling infrastructure, encourage the use of sustainable transport, implement electric vehicle charging points, and enable more working from home. We continue to negotiate with Devon County Council, who are responsible for traffic management in the Totnes area, and with Highways England, who are responsible for the A38 at Dean Prior, to find practicable ways to improve air quality in these ACMA areas. We continue to monitor nitrogen dioxide and to make these results available to relevant agencies and to the public. Current results for 2020 indicate that pollution levels have decreased. Our third air quality management area in Ivy Bridge has recently been the subject of highways works, and we are hopeful that this will have improved the situation there to allow revocation of the air quality management area designation.
Would you like to take the questions? We do it in turn, I'll do the next one. Save you.
Yes, fine.
Losing your breath.
Thank you. Yes, you did. That's lovely. Thank you. Yeah, you did the next one.
Okay. The question from Barbara Smith. Given the known harmful effects of NO2 and particulate pollution to the health of residents, what were the rates for NO2 and particulates across the South Hams in 2020, and how does this compare with previous years? Our response is that we have continued to monitor NO2 levels at locations in the South Hams area. The validated results have not yet been published, but will be published in the next air quality report. However, the raw data suggests that NO2 levels have decreased in 2020 when compared to previous years.
you, Councillor Bastone. I think I've got to take the next one as
Yes.
one because, but thank you for helping out. So the next series of questions are on the CEE bill. There are 3 questions from Massimo Giannuzzi. And the background to this is, re the CEE bill motion from Councillor Hodgson deferred from the 25th of March and again from the 20th of May. I was deeply disappointed that Conservative councillors of SHDC put forward an amendment qualifying the level of support they could offer based on the fact that the bill was waiting to be reintroduced into parliamentary procedure. Well, I'm not sure that that's entirely correct, as the answer will show. But so, question 1. I'd like to ask why Conservative councillors of SHDC put forward this amendment, given that so many other councils throughout the UK, notably Cambridge City Council and locally Buckfast League Town Council, were able to simply pass motions of support. Question 2. Do councillors recognise that this action of introducing the amendment was unnecessary and that it would have been perfectly proper to have voted in support of the motion in the same way that other councils described above did? Question 3. Do councillors recognise and acknowledge that in doing so an unnecessary delay of several months has been introduced into a process that SHDC has already designated an emergency? Then there's a question from Jeannie Hodder. All these questions have a grouped answer, so that's why I'm reading them all out now. The question from Jeannie Hodder: re Councillor Hodgson's CEE bill motion deferred. Will the Conservative leader of the council agree not to introduce any further technical delays when it is represented which are not normal council practice? Sorry, I'm reading what's in front of me.
Represented.
When it is represented, when it is represented, which are not normal council practice and which are not being adopted by other councils in the UK. And then there's a question from Susan Ponton. Read the Hodgson CEE bill motion. Was invoking PERDA 25th of March a sign that leadership regards the CEE bill a party issue involving conflict, not a cross-party supported issue? Are Conservatives committed to supporting bill cross-party when represented in July, as suggested on the 20th of May, or not? And there's a second question from Barbara Smith. Please let me know what was the specific written guidance that the monitoring officer used to come to his decision to invoke PERDA on the 25th of March, and if there was any request or pressure from the executive on the monitoring officer to act as he did. Right, so the monitoring officer has written a combined response to the questions on the CEE bill, which I'm going to read out, and then there are individual answers from me on the political aspects of this. So, had Councillor Hodgson submitted her notice of motion by the deadline for submitting notices of motion to the Council in February, then we would have been able to debate it at that meeting. The next meeting of the Council was during the pre-election period, or PERDA period. The Council is prohibited from publishing any material which, in whole or part, appears to be designed to affect public support for a political party. Publishing in this context also means using Council resources. Local authorities are advised to be especially careful at all times of heightened sensitivities, such as in the pre-election period. Councillor Hodgson's notice of motion was initially taken at face value when it referred to cross-party support. However, although late in the day, the monitoring officer became concerned, having researched the background to the bill further, that the bill was not as cross-party as had been understood. Having regard to the relevant statutory provisions, the statutory code for publicity, and the specific advice on the pre-election period issued by the Local Government Association, the monitoring officer issued the advice that the item should be deferred. According to the Local Government Information Unit, there are 398 principal authorities in the UK and nearly 12,000 local councils. According to the CEE Bill Supporters website, 58 councils have passed a motion in support of the CEE Bill. Since the notice of motion was first aired, the legislative session during which the CEE Bill was being considered has ended and a new session has begun. The ending of a parliamentary session brings to an end most parliamentary business, with the exception of public bills that are carried over by agreement. When the 2019 to 21 session ended, the CEE bill fell while awaiting its second reading. Of the 30 or so bills currently before Parliament, there is no bill of that name or effect. So my answers to these questions are, now question 1, which was about, given that so many other councils throughout the UK, notably Cambridge City and Bath Leeds Town Council, were able to simply pass motions of support. So my answer to that is, Councillor Lewis Herbert, leader of Cambridge City Council, is a colleague of mine whom I admire and respect hugely. He and I are clear as to where our political allegiances divide, even though on a personal basis we're on very good terms. His council may have adopted this motion, but this has little or no relevance to what Southampton might do. Lewis would understand and agree with this. So question 2, do councillors recognise that this action of introducing the amendment was unnecessary and it would have been perfectly proper to have voted in support of the motion in the same way that other councils described did? So my answer to question 2 is that the amendment was proposed as a method of sustaining the spirit of the motion, which made no sense once the bill had fallen at the end of the parliamentary session. The figures in the monitoring officer's reply above are clear. And then question 3 is the one about, not passing the motion has put back our climate change plans. I entirely refute that not having passed this motion will make any difference at all to the progress of the adopted Southampton Climate Change and Biodiversity Action Plan, the evidence of which is included in today's agenda papers. And then there's the question from Mrs. Hodder, to which my answer is the bill no longer exists, so there will not be a further motion. And the question from Mrs. Ponton, the motion cannot be reintroduced if the bill is no longer being considered in Parliament. The question of cross-party support has been dealt with by the monitoring officer. And the question from Barbara Smith, which was, which will be clear, was that this question has already been answered by the monitoring officer. So that's the end of the questions. If we have supplementaries, they'll be answered in writing, Mr. White?
Indeed, thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much. Right, so we are now on to the forward plan. I've picked up a couple of things on this. But the climate change and biodiversity strategy will in fact be, it's down for June, but it will be appearing in July. And that is the other thing. I think there's one of the other papers has got.
Grounds maintenance paper.
It's the grounds maintenance.
Which is coming to
Yes,
July
that's right, that's
today.
coming to the July one.
That's
And I think there's one other paper that's got Councillor Bastain's name on it that probably should have mine. Community
There's a
housing.
couple like that.
Yes, there are a couple
we
with
will
the change of portfolio, so we need to sort that out.
We will
That's
check.
right, thank you, Mr.
Really,
White.
Leader, is the timing issue this one published before?
Yes, of course, it was published before, yes, I understand that. Okay, right. So, the agenda item 7 is the Climate Change and Biodiversity Action Plan update. This is a paper for noting. It sets out progress so far and what is intended to be done over the next 6 months. There is an update of the action plan, which you can see is a dynamic document because there are several new things that have appeared on it. And then there is also an account of the community forum meetings and what has happened at those. Members of the executive, I'll take questions from you first. Any questions? Councillor Hopwood.
Thank you, Leader. Could you tell me, please, how do we fare in comparison to other councils with how we're dealing with our climate change and biodiversity? Because I think we're doing superbly, but I would like to know if we are, or if it's just me that's thinking that, or actually we are ahead of the game with other councils.
I can really only compare this in kind of real time with what's going on with the other districts in Devon, because we have an update at the end of our Devon districts meetings, which are held about every quarter. All I can say is that several of them are struggling to even appoint a climate change officer. And Exeter, which is ahead of the game because they've been doing it for several years now and they have been working very closely with the university, I would say are not noticeably ahead of us now, and it would seem like we've got far more going on than the other districts. I can't be precise on that, but that is very much the impression that I get from those meetings. I don't know whether Mr. Bates would like to comment on that, because he's at those meetings too.
Certainly happy to comment on the discussions across Devon, and I think it's absolutely evident from those that as a council our commitment is absolutely clear. We have a very clear plan and we have put resources behind the delivery of that plan, and in all those respects we are at least doing as well as other councils across Devon. Clearly we're ambitious to move this agenda forward, and I have asked Mr Powell to do some further checks to see how we're doing across the region and indeed nationally, Chair, because we want to be at the forefront of this programme, as I believe you as a council are committed to doing. So I don't know whether Mr Powell has any further information you'd like to provide now, or whether we provide that as part of the update when this comes back.
Thank you, Leader. At the moment, it will be sort of qualitative. We are going to bring forward some actual data, which we can bring to the next meeting around the position of Southampton in comparison to others. I think I would support what's been said so far in terms of the capital investment into actual projects and the fact that we've had Adam as our climate change specialist in place for a considerable period of time now. I think our position is very important when compared to others. There's a couple of national organisations, Stroud and Bristol, that are a little bit further ahead, but they're larger authorities and their commitment was earlier. But in comparison to declarations of a climate change and emergency and all the action plan that we've put in place, I think we were a very strong position.
Thank you very much. Any other questions from the executive?
Just to come back, just to say, so actually for a small rural authority like the South Hams, we are doing pretty well.
We are, and considering COVID, I think it's amazing actually what we've managed to accomplish through lockdown and the rest. Right, any questions from other members here? Councillor Birch.
Yeah, I've got 3 or 4 questions, so shall I ask them all in one go, or shall I ask them one by one?
Probably one by one.
Okay, it's dealing with the progress update, section 4.2b,
yeah,
which is the members' sustainable community locality fund.
Yeah.
Now, I understand that this is going to be, if I use the word loosely, launched this month.
yes.
And I understand that that's in progress. So I wonder if we could just have an update as to how that's progressing, and when in June is it going to be launched? Because I think clearly members are keen to get applications underway. So I think it'd be helpful if we could perhaps have some more information as to when that is to be launched.
I understand the launch is imminent because I've seen some of the sign-off requirements this morning, but I think it's a question of when the IT is ready to accept the applications. Has Mr. Williams got any update on that?
Yeah, that's
Thanks.
right. So I've been working with the customer service improvement team to try and get a web-based system set up, and from what I understand, it's pretty much ready to go now. I've got a meeting with them on Friday just to go through the testing of it. So yeah, it should be imminent. I'll be posting a update in the members' bulletin on Friday about eligibility requirements and things like that as well.
Oh, that's helpful. Presumably it will run in a similar manner to the members' locality fund. In other words, there will be an application form on the website for applicants to complete, and then it needs to be approved by local members. I wanted to just have confirmation that will be the case.
Yeah, so there'll be a form online for both the existing communities locality fund and the climate change one, And what happens is when a member of the public fills that in, it'll come into my tray in Liberty Career, and then I'll ping an email across to the relevant ward member to say this has come in and needs your approval.
Thank you. I have another question. It's on the matter of the forum. I'm pleased to see that that's progressing. I think it would be helpful if members were aware of those who are actually part of the forum. At the moment, we're not aware of who is on the forum or who's participating in the forum. I think that would be helpful for members to know those who are participating. And I think following that through is that I think it's Appendix 2, there was reference at one of the forum meetings to the council's website. And I'm checking the website this morning. The last entry was on the 7th of December last year. And I think looking at the website, all the information that's in this report, most of it or a lot of it should in fact be shown on the website, as well as more details of the forum. So is that going? When is it intended to update the website to bring it up to date? That's my question.
Say that.
Yeah, Mr. Williams?
Yeah. So in terms of the community forum members, we met with them during the last meeting. We proposed an alternative version of the terms of reference to get an agreement about their publication of their names and their affiliation, so if they're town parish councillors and things like that, and they're all happy to do so. So the intention for that is to have that list go up on the website. But in terms of the website, we've been having discussions with Kathy, and we understand some limitations of what we could do with the website, because it would be really good to have a tabulated version of the action plan on there, and for it to be a bit easier for anyone to update, because at the moment it's all reliant on a single officer, and the resources just aren't there to be able to update it in a really frequent way. So we need to have a discussion with Mike in IT to see what the limitations are and where we go from there.
So when will that happen?
As soon as we can, really.
Perhaps, could I take
Yes, do, yes, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, what we want is a lot of functionality that at the moment we don't have on our website. We realise that this is something we want to have that is proactive and real time, essentially, with the action plan updated. So there are some challenges with our present platform. We're working closely with IT. We will find a solution to it, I would hope so, in the next couple of months. We can provide a manual update of the information you've requested to go onto the website so that it's more up to date than it is. But that increased functionality is something we need to sort out and cost.
Can I just say, I think it really is important that there's a good story to tell that needs to be told, and the place is on the website.
I understand that, Councillor Birch, but you've heard what the limitations are at the moment, they are being looked into.
Yeah. So my final question is at L, where it makes reference to the crowdfunder platform. Would it be possible to have some more information on that, please, just as to how that will work?
That will also be going live very shortly, and the requirements for applications to that are also being signed off at the moment. Mr. Williams, have you got news of any dates? Because that's also reliant on IT, isn't it?
Yeah, so with the crowdfunding platform, that's pretty much ready to go now. The eligibility requirements and guidance I'll be putting in a bulletin as well, so you've got information about that. But essentially we'll be seeking, so the way crowdfunding works is a member of the public might want a crowdfunded project. They need to get 25 unique backers. Once they reach that point, it then comes to us to match fund. So we'll match fund different percentages based on what sort of organisation they are. So if they're a town and parish council or a constituted community group, we'll go up to 50%. If they're a smaller community group, we'll do 30%, and then if it's a business, we'll do 20% of match funding, so there'll be up to 5,000 available, but we may consider doing 10,000 for more of those exceptional projects. So if maybe more groups want to come together to do something larger, then the facility's there to do that.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions? Councillor McKay.
Some of what I was going to ask was Councillor Birch was already asked,
Okay.
so sure. I just wanted to say that on a positive note that I was quite pleased reading through what's been included in the action plan. Obviously, it's the solo over car parks and other council access and feasibility study. I think that's great. I would like to see the terms of reference to this study. I mean, we're told that it's just about EV and so on, but it would be nice to see some text as to what is actually in the terms of reference for that study, if that's possible. I noticed that sort of some of the things that are put in the document that I circulated a while ago have actually ended up in the action plan, which is very welcome. There's a few things that aren't. Water source heat pumps and microhydro, I've just been two of them, but there's quite a few others that aren't in there, which is a bit of a shame, but we'll see. The training for SLT and XLT on climate change, I think that's obviously a welcome and good idea, and I know that other local authorities are doing a similar thing.
Is this a comment or a question?
It's leading to a question, yeah.
Okay.
Is it possible for that training to be extended to executive members, for instance, because you will be making decisions and overseeing the response to the emergency we're in. Will the executive members be receiving that training? And also, is it possible that other council members could receive that training? Because we should all be working together on this.
Yes. Councillor McKay, I think it's a question of how much this is needed for operational decisions, how much in that case it would be useful to members, but I could ask Mr Powell to answer that question.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, at the moment, we're rolling out to SLT, ELT as part of twin approach, really, first of all to train the officers up clearly, but also because we've committed to looking at policy reviews and ensuring that we embed the principles of climate change and biodiversity in our early decision making, rather than retrospectively deciding we might want to mitigate the impact of some of our actions. So I think that's the first stage of this. And in terms of member training, I'm not sure whether the present provider provides member training, so it's an option, and obviously it'd be something that the executive would need to decide in the future.
I'm just throwing it into the mix, really, if you would consider it, that would be very grateful. Thanks. I suppose my most serious point that I want to make here, and I'll keep it short because I know that it's coming to ONS in July, so there'll be an opportunity to make much more in-depth comments. But one of the things that I find difficult with the climate change action plan that we have is that it makes no recognition of the fact that how we get to our target of net zero is not taken into account. Clearly, if we've done nothing for the last 2 years, effectively, other than plan, if we continue along that line and then suddenly dropped to zero, that is not the same as a plan. And you'll be aware of the Tyndale report, which suggests 13.7% reduction on an annual basis starting today. I can't see anything in this plan that measures that reduction and suggests how we're going to achieve those targets. And I would like to ask whether there is any moves afoot to add that severe lack in the current action plan.
Thank you, Councillor McKay. I think it would be interesting to see when we compared other plans around Devon what they're doing about this, but it is something that we will bear in mind. You do need to understand that this is a question of resource. We're not a huge council. We've probably set aside more money than any other council, but we only have one officer working on it full time, in collaboration with other officers and projects. So this is a very big ask to keep everything up to date. I think at the moment, I would say that it's far more important to be getting things off the ground, and then when they're actually up and running, we might have some time to sit back and actually plan out how we're going to get there on the rest of it. I take your point, but I think it's a question of capacity at the moment. Mr Powell, Mr Williams down there, do you want to comment at all on that?
Yeah. So obviously the carbon budgeting and trajectory is a bit of a tricky thing to do, especially when you're looking at actions which you don't have direct influence over. So obviously the Devon Carbon Plan does have carbon budgeting in it. We'll obviously be feeding into that process as part of their monitoring. So a lot of our work will be feeding into that. But also when the Devon Carbon Plan is adopted, we'll be bringing forward a lot of actions from that process into our own action plan, as well as any metrics they're using to monitor the carbon budgets with Devon.
Okay, and just a final question about the community forum. Clearly, that's welcome. You've got officers talking to the community, and obviously that's wonderful, and they are giving some ideas to officers, etc. But what I find a big hole in this whole process is the fact that there is no members forum. We as members, elected representatives, don't have any input into this. Currently, our only input into this is an agenda item on ONS every 6 months, and I think it would be in the council's best interests to have some means whereby members are allowed to either be part of this community forum, which currently oddly members aren't allowed to be, or we have a separate forum where members can discuss and come up with ideas and make representations to the working group that's gone. So I think something should be put in place, and I would ask the executive to consider that possibility.
Thank you. We will consider it. Councillor Hawkins.
Mine's more of a comment, that's
Oh
acceptable.
yeah, hang on. Can we just see if we finish the questions? Councillor Rowe, have you got your hand up? Sorry, I can't see you through all the layers of clothing.
Yes, yeah. Can I speak now?
Yes, please do.
It's a very simple question through you, Chair, to Mr Williams. 4.2b with reference to the member sustainability community local funding, we're going to get an extra £3,000 each to use on climate change, etc., etc. What kind of projects are you expecting to come forward to allow us to spend £3,000? Because that's not very much money really to do anything. What kind of things will be accepted in that projects to enable us to spend some of this money, please?
Okay, well, yeah, that would be just anything that kind of relates to our climate change strategy. So we've got 4 objectives in the climate change strategy relating to sustainability, energy, biodiversity and community engagement. So the money can be used on any sorts of those things as long as it kind of fits within our strategy. So, I mean, £3,000 isn't a lot of money, but tree planting can be quite cost effective for someone to do. They might need some money to help some engagement in their community, to set up an event, maybe like a climate fair. So yes, there's lots of things to consider there.
Thank you.
Councillor Abbott.
Thank you. Just a follow-up on that, really. In the table, table 3.5, it says ring fencing and promoting a percentage of members' grant schemes towards tree planting. And locally, the interest in Ivybridge hasn't stated tree planting as the top priority. And I wonder if this is set in stone here, that, well, the percentage is not stated, which leaves it quite open. And then the tree planting seems to be prejudging what the local interest might be. And I'll change that from a comment to a question.
Well, all right. I'll take it as a question, Councillor Abbott. I'll be generous. This action plan, as you know, was made up from member suggestions as a result of workshops and the climate change working group, which was then operating. And so some of the actions are in there, but you've seen that this is a living document. So I think your comment is perfectly reasonable, and it's up to each area to decide what their priorities are. And now there is the £3,000, I don't think actually we probably need to ring fence anything, because there's a fair amount of money there for tree planting or doing other small projects like that. So I think it would be reasonable to adapt that one, and I think I can see the officers through the layers of perspex nodding their heads up there. So yes, thank you for that comment. I think we're happy to accommodate that. Right, so now we'll move on to comments if we finish the questions. Councillor Hawkins.
I'm a member of, I think, 3 or 4 sustainability groups in our patch. I thoroughly enjoy being members of them. I'm learning all the time. I'm only ever hearing good comments about our officer, Adam Williams, from those groups, and I thank you very much for all the hard work and effort you do. Perhaps at some stage we could meet and we could have a good discussion, because I think that would be helpful, because I'm learning, as we all are to a certain extent, well, we are all learning. And I think this council has done an awful lot, because with you in post, we've put you in post, you're doing a lot with our communities, those communities are appreciating what you're doing. But we are a small district council, as we know. We're a rural district council, which is really important to get this right. But by working with Devon County Council and their carbon plan, that's how we can make Devon a greener county, and that's what we've got to do. We've got to work with Devon. And what I'm finding from my sustainability groups is they're all small groups, smaller villages or communities or towns, and they want to learn and share what they're doing. And I thank you for what you do. I'm really pleased what the leader has said, that we're not going to ring fence money for tree planting, because I think there's an awful lot of tree planting going on already, and probably our communities need to do a little bit more than that, or they do need to do more than that, as we all know. So I'd just like to thank you very much for all the hard work and effort you're doing, because I think this council is really doing the best it can with the resources we've got. And what we've got to ensure is that you work hard for our communities and don't stand there, sitting there with member meetings that will achieve very little. But so I just thank you for all what you're doing.
Thank you, Councillor Hopwood.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm glad, I too am really glad that we're not going down the tree planting route, because believe it or not, Woolwell has so many living trees in it, and it's all very, we've got a linear line of trees the whole way around Woolwell, and it's not, which were planted by this council many years ago, and it's not just the planting of these trees, it's the maintaining of them as well, and the siting of them so that they're not interfering with houses, etc. So I'm really glad, because I wouldn't want any more trees in Woolwell, and I don't think the residents would either, so I'm glad to hear that. But just a comment, 4.2F, a campaign for carbon savvy. Now I've just looked this up on Facebook, because or not on Facebook, sorry, on the internet, to remind myself what it is. And I am for climate change, and we have to build towards the future for our residents and for our children and beyond. But I wonder if we need to have a bit of a reality check on this sometimes, because there was a prime opportunity here for North Devon Council, Torridge, West Devon and ourselves to have a lifestyle spring clean. And although you haven't got all the figures in yet, actually only 394 people directly engaged with the post. So out of all those districts, that is a minuscule amount of people. So I think a lot of carbon check, of lifestyle changes and our climate emergency is people swimming a lot and actually thinking it's happening anyway, which it is, because as councils we are all committed. But I just wonder if the public appetite is, although everybody's committed to climate change, and I'm sure if you spoke to anybody in the street, they would say, of course we want climate change. But actually, we look at climate change at every single turn, whether it be picking a stone up off the floor. How can that improve climate change? Well, there has to come a reality check where, although it has to be embedded in our everyday life, a lot of people just really don't get it and aren't interested. And I wonder if, as a council, how we can engage with people so that when we do something like this lifestyle spring clean, we can engage with more people and we can make it so that people understand it, so not use these big words that we use, but make it more just normal, because we're all I've heard this morning, I don't even understand what they mean of some members. And that's not a direct criticism of members, it's just a fact that we need to be more normal about climate change. So we need to be saying, Mum, if you walk your child to school, you will save X. That's normal life. I just think some of this is too high level, and we need to bring it down to basics, and we need to embed it in our communities, but at a basic level. So actually, the person taking the child to school can think about leaving a car at home, walking to school, and not only is that a health benefit, it helps with climate change. So then that person who actually may not have thought they were really interested in climate change, or thought, well, I'm not really doing anything towards it, but I'll let the council do it, actually can see that by doing one small thing, they are helping with climate change. They could look at the food they buy in the shop, and instead of buying something that comes from south wherever, at the back and beyond of nowhere, they're actually buying local produce. So without even realising it, they are helping towards climate change. And it just brings it down a few levels. I just think we need to come way down to basics with this and stop using these carbon tonnes and, you know, who on the street knows what a carbon tonne is? To be frank, I have no idea what a carbon tonne is. Although I do read that we're in 4.2N, we saved 300,000 miles of travel from January last year, and it led to saving 106 tonnes of CO2. Now, I don't know what 106 tonnes of CO2 is, but I do know that 300,000 miles of travel being saved is a significant sum. So I understand that by saving 300,000 miles of travel, I've been one of those people who's been able to help to bring our carbon savings down, and that's the bit I'm used to. I want to, and I think we should be shouting about that, personally, as an authority to say, and we should definitely be telling central government about this, because that would lead to them overturning this stupid rule that we've all got to attend meetings. So let's just bring it down a level.
Thank you, Councillor Hopwood. I think that's very well said. I have to say, in the carbon savvy thing, I did try and fill in their questionnaire, and I got stuck on the technicality of some of the questions. I do think it's an extremely good idea, because it does show you how you can alter your lifestyle in the simplest ways to save CO2, and presumably other gases, because there are other gases that are harmful to the atmosphere as well, but everybody only talks about CO2. But I did get stuck, because it was asking me questions I couldn't answer because they were too technical. So I do agree with you. And I think that's probably why a lot more people looked at it and may have engaged, but probably only just under 400 had enough knowledge to get to the end of it. So I think that's something possibly we could pass back to Carbon Savvy. Mr. Williams, as a comment. Thank you. Do we have any more comments on this one? Well, in that case, it is only a paper for noting, so I intend to move on to the next item, and it will be picked up, no doubt, at European scrutiny at their meeting in July. So, the next item on the agenda, Councillor Bastone, is the Devon Home Choice Policy Changes. This is item 8 on the agenda.
Thank you, Chairman. Members are today asked to approve the changes to the Devon Home Choice Policy. These changes have been made in response to a public consultation conducted in February 2021 and also reflect the partnership's ongoing commitment to transparency, good customer service and meeting local housing needs. The report clearly sets out the local impact these changes will have, allowing members to understand the impact on local residents. Members will note that the policy changes do not impact on Southam's local allocation policies or Section 106 agreements, which will continue to be used to place community at the centre of our allocations approach alongside housing need.
Thank you, Councillor Bastow. Members of the Executive, have you got any questions for Councillor Bastow? No? Other members present, have you got any questions? Okay, so would you like to move the recommendations?
Yes, I'll move the recommendation, which is set out on page 23 of the agenda. And that the recommendation is that with effect from the 1st July 2021, the Executive agrees the policy changes to the Devon Home Choice.
Thank you, and I'll second that. Do we have any comments on this paper? Okay. I would like to make a couple. If there's nobody else making comments. Sorry, did you want to make a comment?
I was just going to make a comment that
Do then.
because Devon Home Choice will be considered by overview and scrutiny at a later date. They undertaken that and will review.
I'd just like to make a comment that these changes are being made across Devon, and so some are more relevant to our district than others. So, for instance, we don't have high blocks of flats, so that won't apply to us. And I think the facility now for people to be able to bid for a property that would still leave them overcrowded gives you some idea of how what a shortage of larger properties there are, and how difficult some families find it to find suitable accommodation. So, because to move house and still be overcrowded, less overcrowded, is not something I think that any of us would particularly enjoy. But I think there are circumstances where, for whatever reason, two families have joined up together and have a bunch of children between them. It does make life very difficult, and I do think, and I would like to thank our housing officers for everything they do to try and find solutions for people in the district. I mean, I feel that in a bad situation, you are really making the best of it, and it could be a lot worse for people if they didn't have you helping them out, because you really do find solutions that are out of the box. So, yeah.
I don't know if Sophie and Steph want
Do you want to say anything, either of you? Do
But
you want to add anything to it?
No, I think Councillor Bastow covered it nicely in the introduction. Thank you, though.
All right, thanks. Okay, so shall we vote on the recommendation then?
Can I just
You want to
comment?
make a comment?
If I can, yeah. Can I just thank our officers, because it is a hard job you're doing. It's very important that we get this right, and we do as much as we possibly can, because we all know we live in a very expensive area, and the local families and the drain of those local families constantly going out of our area is a real concern for all of us. It's a concern for our communities, because it's slowly but surely draining our communities from children and partaking in their towns and employment. We come from Dartford, as Hillary does. There's a considerable amount of people who aren't able to find homes in their towns and in their communities that they want to live in. So whatever we can do with this in a very small way is really important, but it is a priority I think this council has got to take for the future, because it is so important. And I'd just like to thank Izzy and your good self for all the hard work and effort you're doing. It's nice to see Izzy in person again. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, everybody. Oh, Councillor Potwood.
And Sophie with her shoes. I was just looking at what shoes she had on today. I've checked them out.
And Izzy's got high heels.
No, but Sophie's amazing shoes. Anyway, that's completely irrelevant. So I don't know if this is, I'm trying to find a hook into what I'm going to say, and I can't find one. So the only hook I can find is listening to Councillor Pearce on Big Radio Devon this morning, talking about this policy, and also mentioning Seymour lettings. So I just wonder if an answer to this is a relook at our Seymour lettings policy, because I personally don't think, and I don't know if I've got to disclose an interest in this, because I do have a lettings portfolio, so if I do, I apologise. But the Seymour lettings policy is brilliant, but I would be surprised if it's working very well, because you just don't pay market rents for rentals. And if Seymour Lettings paid the market rate for lettings, I am sure that would open up a whole new sector of houses for you. And I wonder if that's something that could be looked into.
It's not just that, because a lot of the savings are on the agency fees rather than the actual rent. So, but I think that's something you could perhaps discuss with one of the housing officers outside the meeting, because it isn't strictly what this paper's about.
No, it's not, but I wanted to put it in the public domain because it's such an important, and I think it really helps.
It might be a little more appropriate at the next item, so perhaps we could return to it briefly on that. So let's vote on this recommendation. Is members of the executive, are you in agreement with this?
It's unanimous, thank you.
Thank you very much. So we'll move on to the Homeless Strategy Action Plan for this year. Councillor Basto, item 9, please.
Members, we are today asked to approve the implementation of the 5th Annual Homeless Strategy Action Plan for 2020-21. The report includes, 21-22. The report includes a review of the 2021 Action Plan, which identifies some significant achievements. Notable achievements include the prevention and relief of 373 households from homelessness in the South Hams and the significant successes in relation to our rough sleeper project. Overall, our officers have achieved a very successful outcome in over 94% of their cases. As you will all be aware, this year has brought with it some unprecedented events which will impact heavily on our residents and on our communities. This week's announcement that the eviction ban has been lifted will no doubt bring with it significant challenges. With this in mind, our action plan has been developed to respond flexibly to changing needs, monitoring and responding to these challenges. Members will focus on preparation for the upcoming 21-27 homeless strategy and review and identification of the current and forthcoming challenges likely to be faced by our communities over the coming years. We are committed to an ongoing prevention-focused approach with partnership working and early intervention forming a central theme to our ongoing work. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Basto. Members of the executive, do you want to ask any questions on this? Other members, has anybody got any questions? Because if not, Councillor Basto, would you like to move the recommendation, please?
I'll move the recommendation, which is on page 43 of the agenda, which is that the executive approves the homelessness strategy action plan 21-22 be adopted with effect from the 1st of April 2021.
Second.
Thank you. Right, any comments, anybody? Councillor Hopwood.
Thank you, Chairman. I just think that we have always had a good relationship with especially those who are long-term homeless and choose to be homeless, because actually some people choose to be homeless and live the way they are, and unfortunately some people find themselves in a homeless situation. I recently had an experience in an adjoining ward to myself where someone was living and sleeping in their car. Within 12 hours of reporting that, officers were down to speak to this gent, and it actually transpired that he was on a contract in a factory and that there were no bed and breakfast open, so he was sleeping in his car. But the response is phenomenal from this team, and I think it's something that we absolutely as a council should be proud of. And I don't know how many rough sleepers we have, how many homeless people we have at the moment, and rough sleepers in the South Hams, but I think our numbers are relatively low. Is that right?
I've been on leave this week, and it does fluctuate sort of day to day, but when I went off on Friday, we had one who was local and entrenched to our area, and 2 who were passing through, 2 were sleeping in their cars.
Right, thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Hawkins, sorry.
Insignificant.
Not only can I not see you, but
I'm insignificant because I don't come from, I'm insignificant because I don't come from Walwell. So, you know, we could do with some more trees in Dartmouth. Again, exactly what Councillor Hopwood has said. You know, we've worked closely with you over a number of years. We've identified residents who have been homeless and the service, and it sounds like an appreciation society, but you do a fantastic job. The cases which I have seen, you have been out there within a few hours, you've contacted them, and you not only just done it the once, but you constantly, and I've asked you, have you been back? Have you seen these people again? And you've already said, yes, we've already been doing it, we've been looking after them, or we've been trying to help them. And with my contacts in the Dartmouth Food Bank, you know, we get those contacts that need help and assistance, and every time we've needed you, yet we've been there. So, you know, we're very lucky to have you. And other than your areas of going shopping, Izzy, you're a great officer.
Thank you very much, Councillor.
Got 2 other officers behind.
Well, yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I know where Izzy
The
goes
real
shopping,
team.
you see. And 2 ladies behind you don't go into the same shopping areas as Izzy does. So I can
Right, Councillor Birch.
Yeah, this might sound as though the record's stuck, but I'd like to join with and thanking Izzy, Sophie and Steph for all the help that they not only give to members but also to those less fortunate in the community. I mean, Totnes has its particular problems and the way that the 3, together with the rest of the team, have helped is much appreciated, and whenever there is a problem in that direction, then by referring it to the officers, one is confident that the problem is going to be addressed. So I'd like to make a big thank you for all the hard work you're doing. It's much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Has anybody else got any comments? Sorry, I'm not missing anybody on that. Yeah, I'd just like to add to that and say that I think one of the best things you do is preventing homelessness, so that actually people never get there in the first place, because that's really important. I think we all really appreciate what you do, and I think we're all very aware that it's not going to get any easier for you, because the rentals have just gone crazy, there's nothing on the market, people can't afford things. It is getting extremely difficult, and I think it's something that's going to get harder and harder as we move forward out of the pandemic, because of popularity of property and people moving out of London and all the rest of it. Things are not going to get any easier for us, and we need to find some lasting solutions. But I think they're sort of beyond what you can do, because I think they're going to be political solutions rather than anything else, because we've got to address the way that the whole property market is working at the moment, because it is not working for local people in this district. It is working against local people in this district at the moment. And the sooner we can make that clear to government, the better. Right. If that's the end of it, let's take a vote on this one. Members of the executive, are you all in favour of the recommendation?
That's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we just have one item, item 10 left, and this is the reports of bodies, and there's a recommendation of the scrutiny committee report, which I'm just trying hard to get to. This is on page 82 of the agenda, and it's recommended to the executive that each member receives a further £500 in recognition of the need and the importance of the localities fund and the difference it can achieve. And that should be funded from the New Homes Bonus Reserve. Now, this came forward at the Open and Scrutiny Panel meeting on Thursday the 1st of April, which is barely 6 weeks, 7 weeks after the budget was passed. And to my mind, if this was needed, it should have been included as a budget item. In the budget, it was proposed that each member would be given £3,000 for climate change actions. So in fact, the member budget has already been increased from the £2,000 with the extra £3,000 sum in for climate change. And I don't think this is necessary for members, but I'd like to hear what other members of the executive have got to say about this. Yes, Councillor Hopwood.
Thank you, Chairman. I agree with what you're saying, and I was surprised that the item came through. And actually, the discussion around the item didn't give me great confidence in the fact that it was needed. And there was a table in the papers that showed clearly how much members had actually spent or had left of their locality budget from the previous year. And there were less than a handful, I think, from memory, I can't remember now how many now, of members that actually were waiting for next year's allocation to spend some more money. I certainly haven't spent all of last year's, and now I have this year's as well. Obviously it will be spent, but I just don't see the need for another £500 on top. I may have had a different view if I hadn't been given the £3,000 for the climate change. But I think with that money, I think that's a real positive step forward to be given the £3,000 to spend our communities on climate change. So actually, our money this year for our members' locality or our members' fund to spend on our communities is actually not £2,000, it's £5,000. So I don't see the need in another £500, and I certainly can't support it.
Thank you. Any other member? Yeah, Councillor Baster.
Yeah, I would agree with our councillor from Wolverton. No, sorry, Plymouth, isn't it? I don't see the need for an extra £500 for members for their locality fund this year. And I think the thing that I was really upset about was, why didn't this come through the normal budgetary process, which is a long-going process, which starts early autumn and goes right through? Why ping this in on the end when all the decisions have been made? And if some of the members want the £500 extra, let's go through the proper process through the budgetary process in the autumn.
Thank you, Councillor Baster. Councillor Birch.
Yeah, I know, I've probably got this as a losing battle, but I'll have a try. And I doubt if I'll make you change your mind. First of all, can I just deal with the matter of the allegation that this was brought in and should have been brought in earlier? Well, first of all, the reason that this was dealt with is that ONS had before it a report dealing with the matter of the locality fund and its effectiveness, etc. In other words, we as a panel were reviewing the effectiveness of the locality fund. And what came out of that report, which I wasn't aware of, is two things. Is that first of all, the £2,000 had not been increased since 2015. And so I thought it was time, in my view, that it was time for an increase. And secondly, and this was really made me think that this is a worthwhile investment by this council, is that in the report it showed that of the £43,800 that had been allocated to members, that went towards projects of nearly £400,000. In other words, this council, quite rightly, has entered into, is seeking to encourage projects by putting funding towards it. And we've heard earlier about the climate change, how we're encouraging communities to come up with projects and that we will contribute towards that. And the same is happening with the funds that are being offered to town councils at the moment. In other words, this council's got the right approach when it comes to its seed corn, in other words, helping towards projects. And I thought, well, that in itself speaks in support of that we are almost by giving members this sustainable, giving members this locality fund, it is actually encouraging more projects within the community. And the third point is that at the end of the day, it's 31 members. If they all spend the additional £500, it's going to cost the grand sum of £15,500. And then you mentioned that this should have been dealt with in the budget. But the week before, on the 25th of March, at a very last minute, and this had not been discussed during the budget process, members were being asked to approve the expenditure of £500,000. And that was not in the budget. We could have argued at that full council meeting, we shouldn't be discussing that. That should have gone in through the budget process. But oh no, there was a last minute proposal came through on the 25th of March. And therefore, this argument that you missed the boat, I'm afraid it doesn't apply, because is there an opportunity here for this council to encourage members to give more towards projects which are going to benefit the community? So I rest my case. I know I doubt if I'd have made you change your minds, but there you are. I mean, perhaps when it comes to the next budget round, perhaps take another run at it. But here is an opportunity for the executive to encourage the community to come up with more projects which are going to benefit our district. I rest my case.
Councillor Birch, I think you're comparing apples with pears, because the funding that was put forward at the council meeting was for emergency measures for this summer, given that the situation is as it is this summer, and I think this week has shown us what this summer is going to be like. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that members de facto have had that increase because they've got the climate change money as well now. So I accept your seed corn funding argument, and I think it is very valuable, and there is a lot of seed corn funding that goes on, but there are also grants that are made that aren't particularly for that at all. For instance, to the food bank. Now, I don't think we could call that seed corn funding. It's look, I'm not knocking it because it's worthy, but there is a lot of money that is not going to projects to help fund more match fund projects. But I think the climate change funding will help do that a lot more. So I'm afraid, I don't think you've persuaded us.
Can I just add one point then?
Yes.
And I'm picking up the point that Councillor Hopwood made, is that looking at the list that was presented to ONS, there are several councillors who have not spent their full allowance, and I can see that is an argument against what I'm proposing. Could I put in a plea that where there are those councillors who are up against the limit and they're looking for money, that those councillors who are well below the limit, that they be generous in making a contribution towards projects where other members are going to go over the limit. I've just put in that plea.
Well, I'm not sure that option is open to spending money in other wards, because the whole point is that it's distributed across the council. But there are a number of wards with multi-members in, so it may be possible to pass it on to another member if you've used up all your allowance and somebody in your ward hasn't. That would be perfectly possible. Right, members of the executive, I propose that we do not accept this recommendation and that we vote against it. Do I have a seconder? Thank you. Did you want to speak, Councillor? Sorry,
sorry. Maybe I'm lucky with my patch. People are quite self-sufficient and they seem to get an awful lot done without much money, which is really good. And I think they take more ownership of what we do because I'm not throwing money at them. They know to come and talk to me if they want money, and they know I'll find it from somewhere. So that, as far as I'm concerned, is good enough. And yeah, I'm a bit frugal, they're all frugal, but you know, we've already planted no end of trees, saplings, that we've managed to scrounge, because somebody's got the right kind of context. I strayed actually. I went down to Philip Park. Although it's in Oakwood Parish, it might not be in my ward, but South Dartmoor Energy were good enough to sponsor some wildflower planting. And I thought, well, that would be nice because I can learn a bit about how it's done and I can bring it back to our parish. Although Philip Park's in our parish, back to the village. And that was sponsored by South Dartmoor Community Energy. And again, we didn't cost Southampton anything, but it's a lovely little project. It's happened within the Southampton. I should go down and look at the flowers in Philip Park sometime. You know, there's an awful lot going on, and I'm not sure that just throwing money at things is necessarily the right way.
Thank you, that's a valuable contribution. And thank you for seconding you did.
I did, yes.
You did second my proposal. Right, shall we take a vote on it then, please, Executive, that we do not accept this?
That proposal is unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That brings us to the end of this morning's business. I'm closing the meeting. Thank you very much.